I'm doing the dishes the other day, and I'm doing my normal whistling and clapping and snapping as I do, and my wife looks over to me and she goes, I just realized that your internal monologue in life as you go through your day must be do-de-do-do-do, do-de-do-do-do, do-de-do-do-do. And I will be honest, she might be right. That might be my internal monologue.
Most of us have voices inside of our heads, and it's usually our parents. You've got Ned Flanders.
Yes, I
do. Yes, you do, diddly do.
I always, my heart goes out to our fellow artist friends whose internal monologue is "You're terrible, you're the worst, you're an imposter," that kind of thing. And for a big chunk of my life, my internal monologue is, blue skies, sunny day. Just
we crack open a look inside Dave's subconscious, and it's like when Roger Rabbit came through the tunnel on the other side of Toontown, and you've got the bird singing, "Smile, darn ya, smile."
You crack open my skull, and it's just an image of a baby kitten swimming around in milk, going meow 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 meow.
Happy little baby kitten.
Anyway, well, hello everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So
and
Dave,
Brad,
go ahead.
We're both jumping on the bandwagon here to ask the other one how they're doing. How are you doing, my friend?
It's been a very productive week. Like I said last show, I'm in Huntsville, Alabama, in a extended stay hotel.
Now, Huntsville, correct me if I'm wrong, was Huntsville the original inspiration for Metropolis in DC Comics?
Yes, it was. You can see it in the skyline, the sparkling Huntsville skyline.
If you look just past the Dairy Queen and the Piggly Wiggly, you can see the Huntsville skyline, massive, just skyscrapers reaching to the stars.
Yeah, and the blimps, the sleek blimps going from skyscraper to skyscraper. It's really amazing here.
So I've been to Alabama, but I've never been to Huntsville. Paint me a picture of what Huntsville, Alabama is like. Is it like 3 lights long, or how big is it?
The part of Huntsville that I'm in, I'm on University Drive right now, and the part of Huntsville that I'm in, picture a strip mall. Picture a strip mall in your mind. Now multiply it by about 17. And it's just strip malls all the way down either side of the street. Strip mall, strip mall, strip mall. There's 110 like franchisee type restaurants. It's not bad, but it's not like, it's not particularly exciting either.
Is it kind of one of those main drags where it looks like if there's a truck that overturns on the freeway, that Huntsville's main drag becomes the alternate route?
Yeah, that might not be such a bad way to put it.
Those kind of towns in the Midwest and in the South where it's just like it's parallel to a freeway. They didn't put the freeway through the town. But if a truck overturns and 1,000 plastic cups spill out, then they're like, all right, everybody drive through Huntsville then. That's fine.
And then all those strip malls are going to get lots and lots of business that day.
Yeah. And so temperature-wise, 110, 115, what are we looking at Huntsville?
Like actually very, very comfortable. I have not walked outside and felt uncomfortable, either hot or cold yet since being here. It rained a little bit. Well, now here's
the real question for everybody at home. Yeah. How often have you walked outside of your hotel room?
Not freaking often. As seldom as possible. It's been fantastic.
I know you well enough to know the pants have stayed off and crumpled by the front door of that hotel room.
There is no pants. This is a no pants zone. It has been since the moment I walked in.
Well, I will tell you as a friend, if you're doing work at the desk of a Huntsville, Alabama hotel, you might want to put the pants back on. Just
maybe take one of those towels from the bathroom and just fold it up and put it underneath.
Yeah, don't shine a blue light on that room. You're gonna want to just put your pants back on.
No, I really finally figured this out. This is the second year in a row that we've done this. My younger son is up the street at Space Camp, and it's a sleepaway camp, but it's so far away from Philly, it would have been dumb for me to have driven all the way down here and then drive back, because then I would have had maybe a chance to sleep, and then it would be time to drive back down here and pick him up and drive back. So this is, and I'm staying in the same place that I stayed last year because it worked out really well. And they've got what you would expect out of a nice hotel breakfast. I mean, it's better than a continental breakfast. They've got eggs and sausage, and they've got one of those waffle makers. Do you know the joy I feel when I walk into a hotel and see it's got a waffle maker? It's
Brad Geiger, a man of sophisticated taste.
Oh, I love the waffle maker.
I love the idea, though, of you calling ahead like, do you have a waffle maker there? Do you perhaps have a waffle maker in your Huntsville, Alabama hotel? Hello, Brad Geiger here, 55 Klondike 9. Do you have a waffle maker?
By chance, do you have a waffle maker?
I say, old boy, I shan't be booking my stay there if you don't have a waffle maker. Do you at least approve of guests bringing their own waffle maker? I would like to bring my waffle maker with me.
I'd like to not bring my own, but I'd like to use yours. My in-laws... Go ahead.
You know what's a funny word that doesn't appear in British RP English is the word waffle. There's no good way to say waffle in British RP. I say waffle.
Yeah, you've got to kind of screw up that L a little bit.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, though, before we... I almost forgot to mention this at the top of the show. What? Go ahead. What I say?
No, you are like shot out of a cannon today. It's amazing.
Oh, I'm on coffee number 4. I'm sorry about that.
I can tell. Well, let me get to the original point here of telling you about breakfast. Not only because it wasn't the waffle maker, that was not the point. But they have a really nice breakfast, right? And then in the evening they've got social hour. And last year I spent an entire week here. And I didn't go to social hour because I'm antisocial. I figure if I go to social hour, they're going to want me to talk to people, and I don't want to do that. And my wife is like, they probably have snacks. She says, go down to social hour and fill up your plate, turn around, and leave. What are they going to do? Kick you out of the hotel? Just go down and get some snacks, if nothing else. You're paying for it. So I went down to social hour on Monday, and they not only said they had like a little dinner there. They had grilled chicken sandwiches and free beer. So I'm like, I love social hour. I still didn't talk to anybody. I took my food over in the corner like a caveman and kind of, shielded it, put my shoulder in front of it and kind of trapped.
Turned towards the wall slightly.
All of which to say, I've been doing social hour every night, going down there, getting a dinner, basically, and free beer, and coming back and working into the night. So really the only meal I have to buy if I'm hungry is lunch, which I've gone out and done a couple times. So old Cheapy McGee here.
So you've left the hotel room exactly twice then. This is amazing.
That's pretty accurate, too.
You're like that silverback gorilla that comes out of his cave at the zoo, flings some poop at people, and then goes back into his cave.
And turns around, grunts over his shoulder,
yeah.
and stumbles back into where I'm from. That's the best way of putting it.
Well, I am glad, though, that you're at least being productive. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I'm happy that's working for you.
So far, so good. I think I left myself a little bit too much to do this week because I wanted to get to a certain point and do some prep for the college class that I'm going to start teaching starting Monday. And I got a feeling I'm going to be doing a lot of that over the weekend. But for the most part, I did some writing that I'm very happy with. And now it's just sitting down and doing a lot of penciling and a lot of inking.
Well, good. That's great. Yeah. I'm proud of you. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, and listen, before we get into our questions, of which we have many good ones this week, I wanted to mention one thing because it's ongoing now. I've just started a Kickstarter for my new Drive book, my Act 2 hardcover. It's over at drivekickstarter.com.
Congratulations. That's drivekickstarter.com.
Yeah, so that's drivekickstarter.com is what you were trying to say there, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I think I remember reading somewhere that you have to repeat something 7 times before somebody
Brad,
remembers it.
If one were to say drivekickstarter.com once, that's enough. That's all you need to say is just the once, the drivekickstarter.com.
You don't want me to keep saying drivekickstarter.com. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm getting at, is that if someone wants both book 1 and book 2 of Drive at drivekickstarter.com, they just go to drivekickstarter.com. We don't need to belabor the point. Let's leave these people alone.
But here's the deal. I've got volume 1 in hardcover. I want volume 2 in hardcover.
Oh, Brad, like we've prepared for every possibility over at drivekickstarter.com. You can just get book 2 at drivekickstarter.com. So you're good.
As a hardcover?
As a hardcover or as a softcover, my friend. And you can get 1 and 2 as a hardcover or softcover. So drivekickstarter.com is going to have everything you need.
And that's both at drivekickstarter.com.
That's right. Yes.
So
now that I know that you were half joking as you did it, but I got to tell you, I appreciate it so much because we got to say it a few times.
Well, no. How many Kickstarters have you done so far?
8. 7.
You've done
8 or 7, something like that.
Let's go with 7, just to be on the conservative side.
Sure.
When you hit the button on this one, were you any more confident than the first time you hit the button on number 1 Kickstarter?
More confident, but I'm fairly certain that this one will not beat the first Drive Kickstarter.
Is that right?
I think. I don't know. I don't know. I just my gut tells me that there's going to be less people that want to start at book 2. You know what I mean? Like they're like, it's too late to start. And so they don't do it at all. But what do I know? Maybe it'll do better. We'll see.
That's interesting. I guess my point is, for me, every time I launch a Kickstarter, I am in full panic mode. In fact, my last Kickstarter, I changed my goal right up until like 10 minutes before I hit the button. Not by a whole lot, not by tens of thousands, but I was fiddling with that thing until finally I'm like, I've got to hit the button or I'm going to go crazy.
Right. Yeah, no, I think what's making me slightly calmer than my normal Kickstarter is the fact that this is a little bit more treading ground that I've already tread, if you know what I mean. Like I've already done Act 1 of Drive and it did great. So even if I did 80% of what that first Kickstarter did, I'm fine with it. It's fine, you know.
Yeah. No, you're going to do fine. You're going to do fine. Yeah,
like the last one ended up at 105. So if I end up anything north of 65 or 75, I'll be happy. That'll be fine. You know, that's great.
No, that's fantastic. Now, did you do that thing that you shared with our listeners before where you open it up early to your Patreon backers?
Yes, and there are special levels that will lock by the time that the link goes public. So the Kickstarter backers get it early, and by the time you're hearing this, I don't actually know yet. You'll see how it went, and you'll see whether I made my goal and jumped out of the gate with helping the Patreon backers go early. We'll see.
I still think that's such a great strategy. I stole that for my own Kickstarter after you said about doing it, and it works like a charm. I really strongly advocate it.
And I have to tell you, just in the last week and a half, I've been publishing that there will be a special treat for Patreon backers on Kickstarter, and in so doing, gained another 25 backers. So
really,
and that was part of the purpose. And do I know that I will lose some of them? Absolutely. Like I know that there will be people that'll drop out as soon as they get the special thing. Mm-hmm. That's being human nature, being what it is. But if I can keep even 50% of those people, great. You know.
Now, do you do pay up front or pay at the end of the month?
Pay up front.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about somebody jumping in, using the discount, and jumping out before the end of the month.
I fully expect, knowing you as I do, I fully expect you'll do that. But my hope is that most other people won't. So
there's one reason that you expect me to do it is because that's how I got Drive Kickstarter number 1 at drivekickstarter.com. You don't think I'm paying full price for that stuff, do you?
I like that the Brad discount is just like, hey, remember when I shared that booth with you at Comic-Con? Yeah, I took a couple Sheldon books. Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, the old 5-finger discount.
Yeah, exactly. So Bradley J, we got an audio question this week that I want to play for you. But I have a fun question that was texted to me that I want to ask you this week. And it's from our mutual acquaintance, Will Shipley, a famous Mac programmer, who texted me and he said, I have an unsolicited suggestion for you, which I know everyone loves, which I appreciated as a joke. He said, when I changed my Twitter photo to a very recognizable version of my face, people started introducing themselves to me in all kinds of social situations, conventions, etc., because they actually recognized me. And I realized in that it was a really valuable thing for my business. And then he said, end of unsolicited advice. And the reason he's sending that to me is I, for the last 10 years or so, have had a photo of me cosplaying as Captain Crunch from my Mattel Toys days.
Yeah.
And it's just been my social media photo go-to for a decade now. But
it's a delightful photo.
It's both me, but it's not me. Like, it doesn't really give you the full sense of my face and just how tremendously handsome I am, how much God gifted me, really, And so, and what Will is saying is the people want to see. I don't know where I'm going with this joke.
You're just slopping over with charisma, is what you're saying.
No, but let's talk for a second, because I think this is an interesting thought here. Is there value from a business standpoint in putting your face up there versus either a modified version of our face or a drawing of us or a drawing of our characters? What are your thoughts, Bradley J? Go.
I've got so many thoughts on this. I think way too much about this stuff, and I've actually had a long time pondering Twitter icons. Not only myself, but when I see other people's Twitter icons, I really think too much about it. But I've got two main things to say. Number one, I've had my recognizable face on my Twitter feed going back since I started Twitter. Same thing with Facebook, and that's well over 10 years. And nobody's ever introduced themselves to me. So I don't know that I've had the same experience, or maybe Will reaches a lot more people than I do, or maybe I've got a face that you don't want to walk up and introduce yourself to. I fully expect that it may be one of those two things or a combination of both. But no, I've had my face, and because at the heart, I believe in branding myself as an artist rather than my work. I want you to connect, especially on social media. I want you to connect with me first and the work second, because the work may change. I may end Evil Inc. and start a new thing. I may keep Evil Inc. and start a third thing. All of the work is going to change, but the me is going to hopefully stay somewhat the same, right, for better or for worse. So I believe in branding the artist before the work, and so I've always kind of used my face. And I will say this: if you use something other than your face, man, really, really be careful what that image is, because there's a bunch of you guys that I don't like because I react negatively to your Twitter icon every time I see it. And it doesn't make any sense, and it's illogical. But as soon as I see that image, I'm like, ugh, this guy again.
Whoa, wait a minute. Okay, hold on. This is incredible. We got to unpack this. So you don't have to give me who, but I'm curious what style of social media profile photo would turn your stomach.
Oh, now, this is what I'm talking about. Not necessarily a photo of the person's face, but although there's times that happens too. It's more when they use a drawing and I don't like the drawing. If the drawing is aggressive or has a big open mouth and they're yelling, that turns me off right off the bat. It's like I don't want to open up my iPhone and have somebody yelling at me. It's uncomfortable. I react very viscerally to that kind of stuff. Oh, and by the way, I don't think you should listen to this and say that everybody's like this. I don't think that a lot of people deal with the mental gymnastics that goes on inside my brain. But no, I don't like aggressive. I don't like poorly drawn. If you're going to have a Twitter image in there that you've drawn, it should be it should be something that is well drawn. It can be viewed even at that small size. You can still tell what it is, and it should not be aggressive or angry, because there's too much aggressive and angry on all social media as it is. I don't need your Twitter icon making it worse for me.
Right, it's a little bit like a drawing or a photo of a gun being pointed at you. You're like, I don't want this. I don't want this aimed at me.
Yeah, Yeah, and listen, none of us is cosmopolitan models. None of us are magazine models. We're a lot of people say, "Well, I don't have a very good face. I'm not going to take a picture of my face." None of us is pretty. There's a few. There's one or two of us out there that are easy on the eyes, but good Lord, we're cartoonists. We're a motley crew. I don't think you should necessarily say I'm not going to use a photo of my face because I'm not camera ready. I think we all get that. I think a photo of your face is a nice thing to have on social media.
Well, it's funny. I'm looking through, while you were saying that, I was looking through my social media feed, and all of our cartoonist friends have drawings of themselves except for you and I.
Well, maybe we're wrong.
And I'm in cosplay, so even I don't really have a photo of my face. But
yeah.
Literally everybody that I follow, everybody who's anybody, Brad. No, I'm just saying everybody in my feed has a drawing. That's interesting. So I mean, maybe that's viewed as an extension of branding yourself in the sense that you're saying, this is my style. This is what you're going to get if you follow me on social media.
Yeah.
And I guess in a broader social media standpoint, when people are looking, do I want to follow this comedian or this cartoonist? A drawing of you is letting people know, hey, I'm not, Seinfeld. I'm a cartoonist, that kind of thing. I don't know.
Well, I guess. Okay, I'm going to go even further. If you've got a self caricature of that you've done, this is my drawing of me in my style. That I tend to float with just fine. But like your character, I tend to be not so crazy about. And if it's just this, off the wall image that has no connection to you as a person other than the fact that you drew it, then you've really got to deliver something good, or else I react badly to it.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't think about it until you described the idea of a violent or a threatening avatar. But I realized that I react to those the same way I react to someone who's got a face tattoo, which is like, oh, okay, I'm gonna back away a little bit here.
Yeah. The eyebrows down and the mouth wide open. It's like, nah, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah, I look for things that bring joy into my life. I don't want more anger and aggression. But some people do. Some people like horror or violent comics and that kind of, and that's fine. It's just not for me. So look at the two old gentlemen, and by that I mean gentle, just wanting to read their silly little comics in their happy little lands, doing their dishes, going do 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 do. So all right, well let's ask our first audio question from one of our Patreon backers, and let me play that one for you right now, Bradley J.
Hi, Brad and Dave. This is Dave Slusher, the writer of the Spoonbenders webcomic. One of the things I've been experimenting with in writing the comic is trying to do kind of the Hollywood Writers' Room organization, where I sit down and try to generate a lot of ideas with no pressure to create a script, and then try to generate a lot of scripts at the same time, so that I kind of pipeline it together, analogous to, say, doing all the penciling, then all the inking. I'm curious how you guys work when you're getting from no ideas to an actionable script. Thanks.
Oh, all right, Bradley J. You want to go first on this one, or you want me to tackle it first?
I'll jump in because that's exactly what I've been doing for the first 2 days of being here in Huntsville. Was I needed to write the next Evil Inc. storyline. Like I said in previous shows, I'm doing this more, and I'm using a sitcom template to kind of build out 22-page stories at a time. So each one of these is now chapters of a greater Evil Inc. story, but each chapter is kind of a standalone piece with its own arcs and in like story A and story B arc that connects at the end. So it's something that's very real for what I'm doing right now. And I'm telling you, the first day I struggled. And it's one of those things that I knew I was going to be doing this, so I would kind of put aside some time in the days running up to having this time to kind of go over and see, okay, where do I have storylines that haven't come to a conclusion? Which storylines need to carry over? What types of things can I talk about? For example, since Evil Inc. takes place in an office setting, it's oftentimes very useful to take a common office situation, like the CEO has decided that there's going to be budget cuts. All right. Now, to use that as a vehicle for the story to move forward, that's useful. I can build any number of things into that overall plot device. I can make a lot of things happen there, but I got to decide which one is going to be best. And there's a lot to choose from. So I did a lot of like pre-brainstorming where I got all this stuff kind of fresh in my mind and everything. And man, nothing came out the first day. And there's nothing worse. Like I and it's playing in the back of my head. I just got done saying about how I'm gonna do all this work in Huntsville, and everybody at Comic Lab has heard me talk about it. And here I have the first day, and I've wasted it, and I've done nothing. There's nothing worse than that feeling. And I came to a realization. And I tweeted this, by the way, got absolutely no response. So it must have not have been as insightful.
It really resonated with the people at home. Yeah.
Yeah, it must not have been as insightful as I thought it was. But there's a difference between walking away from a project and running away from a project. And that is this. What I really should have done was spent an hour writing. And when nothing happened, set that down, walk away, and do something else for a little bit, and then maybe come back to it in a couple hours, right? But to sit there for hour after hour with nothing happening, and after that first hour or first hour and a half, if nothing's happened, nothing's gonna happen. You're not gonna make it happen at that point.
Absolutely.
And of course, the antithesis of that is when you set it down and you never come back. So walking away from a project is good. Running away doesn't help. If you go and you set that down and then you don't come back to it and give it a second chance, and I'm going to even say like within the same day or within the same couple of days or within the same 24-hour span, because you need that stuff freshly percolating in your mind, that counts as running away if you put it down for too long. But if you sit there and spin your wheels and spin your wheels and spin your wheels, nothing's going to come of it. And to answer directly his question, what I did, and I rediscover this every time. It's the same way I discovered my way out of the last storyline, and I completely forgot about it. And then I discovered it again, is that really so much of this doesn't matter. All you've got to do is say, okay, I'm going to do this. And I finally decided what my this was. I decided what my arc was going to be. It's going to be somebody has created a crowdsourcing app that uses kind of like the disruptive economy to do to one of Evil Inc.'s businesses what Uber has done to taxis, right? And so that's going to be the problem that they have to solve. Who's behind it and what are they going to do with them? There's my arc. Now, I don't need anything else than that for right now. I need to divide it up into sections. First, you discover it. Then somebody gets assigned to do something about it. Then they have to find them. Then they find them. Then they do something about it. 5 sections. This is getting easier. Now, all I got to do is go to that first section and find, like we talked about way back when, I don't know which episode, when we talked about finding the best route from Philadelphia to Chicago. Now I take that first section and say, what's the funniest way to get from point A to point B? If you take it and divide it up like that, it's so much easier. But the first step is just deciding what that is. And so many times, Dave, it's not important what it is, because once you decide what your objective is, now you've got a problem to solve.
Right.
Before you had a cloud, you had nothing you could put your hands on. That's impossible. But once you've decided on something, now it all becomes about solving the problem.
Right.
So
right.
How do you go about solving this? There's nothing there problem.
Well, so I think the way you just described your troubleshooting there is very specific for a long form story. Is that fair to say? Like
Absolutely.
You're saying you needed to decide on which storyline, and then everything after that is problem solving. It's pathfinding. It's what's the funniest route to get to the joke while still telling a story, right? Like that's once you make a commitment, basically. And so that's a very specific kind of brainstorming. Is like, hey, here's 40 different paths I could take. La la la. We're just throwing them all out. We're writing them all down. Now pick, right? Like that's what you were saying.
Yeah.
And then, but for short form comics, which I think was what he was saying with his first part of the question there, where he's talking about throwing as many ideas out as possible and
Yeah.
not being nailed on any. I equate that more with individual joke writing, which is just quality or quantity, not quality. Just throw a lot of ideas out. And then, frankly, if that's not working, if you're throwing out all the topics that you normally like to write about and nothing is coming, to Brad's point, then it is time to either walk away. And by that, I mean literally walk away. Going for a walk is an amazing thing. Get out of your house and walk 3 blocks. And I guarantee you, the first block will be useless. The second block, your mind will start wandering and you'll look at a cat or a squirrel or a Toyota Tercel and you'll be like, and then by the third block, you'll start generating ideas based on the things you're seeing because you're breaking the frame of what your mind was thinking of. Other options, shower. For whatever reason, a shower is both relaxing to your mind. It takes the pressure off. I think something literally happens vascularly that your blood flow changes to your brain. And so even if it's midday, if I'm really in a pickle and I need an idea, a shower is great.
And it's another no pants activity.
Yeah. Which I'm always trying to up in my life. Yes. Says the man with no pants on in Huntsville, Alabama. And then the third one is for just basic random ideas. Brad had a great one the other day with the story starter for Reddit. Just like something that's throwing a lot of ideas at you. That's always fun. And then even just hitting random on Wikipedia and reading 5 articles of a topic that passingly is of interest to you. You don't have to read every one that you hit random on, but just read if you're like, oh, here's a famous shipwreck. I've never read about that. I'm going to read about it. I guarantee you, if you read that full Wikipedia as a joke writer, you're going to start thinking of jokes as you're reading paragraph 19 of that Wikipedia entry, because your mind, both out of interest and boredom, will start going, well, that's a funny moment that the violinist did that while the ship was going down. And you're going to start writing jokes about that, So anything that gives your brain new fodder with brainstorming, I think is helpful. And then the second stage of how to weed it out, how to find the thing that that's working, to Brad's point about when he says you just got to pick, sometimes it's just in your bones and there's no other better way to describe it, the one that you go with. And then from there, it's just a matter of whittling down that log into a cute little statuette that you can sell at your corner store. And what metaphor am I going with here? What happened?
How did we get to whittling? I was with you there all the way until we started whittling.
As I was saying it, I was like, bail out. What are you doing?
Don't say long.
Anyway. What I'm getting at, though, is that I do think, generally, I think that they are onto something, that the idea of throwing out a lot of ideas is great because you don't want to be judgmental. You don't want to have your editorial eye on it at first when you're brainstorming, if you're really, truly brainstorming. And then once you're past that, once you have 10, 20, 30 ideas of differing levels of quality, you pause on the brainstorming and you bring out your editorial mind and you say, all right, which one of these is actually good? Which one of these interests me enough to spend the next hour and a half on? Which one of these is fun? And then go from there.
And for the love of Mike, put a little time in between that. In other words, when you're finished brainstorming, set it down, go take another walk. And better yet, my advice, I don't know whether you agree with this, Dave, put a good 24 hours in between that and opening up your editorial mind. Let that stuff sit for a little bit. Then you really will be able to come back later and see which stuff is good and which stuff just seemed good. Do you agree?
But also, if you do that, and I actually agree with Brad, time is a great editor. If you do that, though, just make sure you've captured your ideas sufficiently so that future Brad knows what the hell past Brad had written down in that notebook.
Yeah, I had the word raccoons written down here. What the heck did that mean?
I literally had an email to myself one time that said, amazing idea. And I opened it up and it was just like fish on a plate. And I was like, what? What is this? Is not an idea. This is not even a half of an idea. What the hell? Like half asleep? I don't even know what happened there. Anyway. So yeah, just make sure you capture enough of the idea so that future you goes, oh, I see what I was getting at. Yeah, there's something to that joke,
Yeah. And then, as we always say, draft after draft after draft. Write several drafts of that joke because it's not funny yet. Trust me, it's not funny yet. Write it again. Push it further. One thing I love suggesting to people is one more panel. Give me your joke the way it is. Now, add one more panel. What happens next? So often, so many of us stop when it just gets a little clever. And all we need to do is be pushed to do one more panel. And then we get to the funny. And then you go back and edit it. So you take out all the fat and you make it sleek and trim, and you've got something good. But you've got to do that first. You've got to force yourself to go one more panel from what you thought was funny.
Right. Well, and so often, I'm sure this is the case with you, when I'm writing short form, I start with the punchline and I work backwards, right? You know, like I know roughly the setup and final punch that I have. So then it's basically I need the 2 panels in front of that. And what happens is if I write that out for the first time and then go back and look at it, there's so much cruft in there that I could take out because I was stumbling my way to get to that punchline. And then you can absolutely streamline anything you write first time through. There's no question about that. You can easily take out 20, 30% of anything. And brevity always helps. There's certain jokes that require a little florid writing, but brevity always helps. So if you've got 3 words that can be substituted for one word, boy, that'll help. There is a certain bit of antagonism that a reader builds up if a joke is of passing value, but it took them 20 minutes to get to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't want to antagonize them, and so you want to make the payoff worth the time spent.
I got to mention, this is a total tangent. Have you ever been reading a comic and looked at the sheer number of words that were required to read the comic and decide there's no way this could possibly be funny and just not read it?
I've had entire titles where I don't read them anymore because I look at them and going, ugh, what am I, stuck on an island by myself? I got things to do.
And if I am, I could use it for kindling. No, unless you really know that this cartoonist has like a 90% chance of making you laugh, or if it's not humor, compelling you in some way. This is going to be interesting. And you look at that comic and you see a whole lot of words and you're like, nah, this guy, last 3 comics I read of theirs didn't make me laugh. If I see a lot of words, I'm not reading this one either.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think Jim Davis's 25 words per comic strip is a little too light. I mean, that's specifically written for kids and secretaries. So Garfield is a little too light, but I think, honestly, if you look at the word count of a Calvin and Hobbes for strips, or if you look at the word count for any well-written DC Marvel comic for a page comic, you'll get the rough estimate of what you should be writing. And if it's significantly more than that, you might want to ask yourself, what are you giving your readers in exchange for all those extra words?
Yeah. Oh, what a great way to think about it. I used to hate that Jim Davis rule because I don't like you.
Well, in all fairness, though, Brad, it really is written for 5 to 10-year-olds. It's not like it's
true enough. But here's what I'm saying. When I first heard about that, and I think you and I are alike in this a little bit. As soon as somebody tells us a rule, we want to find a way around it. Don't give me no rule, right? And I probably cleave to this a little bit more. I like my rules of thumb. But when I heard that one, I'm like, 20, I'm not going to count every word. That's such a stupid, and you could write something, and who's he to say 24? I'm telling you, the more I go through life, the more I think the closer we get to a number like 24, the better. And I can see the wisdom in setting that arbitrary number. It's the same thing with tweets. Sometimes they were a little bit better when they were 144 characters because it really made you think about what's the quickest way and the most brief way to say concisely your thought.
Yeah, I think the 20s or 30s Dave Kellett that learned that Jim Davis put an artificial 25-word limit on Garfield and was like, oh, that's silly. Why would he do that? That Dave Kellett was also driving a Honda, and Jim Davis, I think, owns a Picasso. So maybe I should have shut up. That maybe on some level I should have learned a little something out of it and be more humble about it. Granted, it was an extreme, but maybe there's a point there in terms of editing.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on to our next question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Brad. Here's the question: where are the largest sources of income you receive as a cartoonist coming from? Books, cons, ads, social media, Patreon, other. And how has that changed over the years? And what are the key areas a new cartoonist should focus on as far as earning income as they start out? And then that is a great question. That's a really good question because, boy, have we experienced change over the years in our careers. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first?
You go first on this one.
Okay. So Brad's main source of income was traditionally selling plasma. That was a
yes, it was.
So I'll go first. I did this before the show since I knew this question was coming, and I broke down my income based on percentages. And so here is roughly what I make studio wise. So Patreon makes roughly between 30 and 35% of my annualized income. Kickstarters, of which I do 2, annualized across a couple of years, because sometimes there's collections like a drive book that's worth 2 years of work, right? Those annualized across different years are worth about 35% of my income per year. Convention sales are about 10% of my income. Online sales are about 10%, maybe 15% if I have a good year. Ads and miscellany are about 2 to 5%. And then original art sales, which I break out as separate from my online sales, that's another 5%. So that's my breakdown of of income. And for me, the way that's changed is that if you were to jump back 5 years, Patreon would obviously be 0. Online sales and conventions would be much higher, and ads would be much higher. And then original art would be about the same. So how about you, Brad? How does your income break out?
Well, this is really interesting because on webcomics.com, I actually put this up as a poll a couple of years, with some time in between. I did a poll in 2015, and I did a poll that I just ended a couple of weeks ago that started in 2017. I leave them up for a little bit of time to get as many responses as I can. Right. Here's something interesting in terms of charting how this has changed. The question was, what is your primary source of income as a web cartoonist? 2015, advertising, 46%, Patreon, which was just starting to swing upwards, 31%. And then the rest kind of divided among merchandise, Kickstarter, and comic conventions at 13% each. And then a bunch of other ones like subscription services, donations, filling out the rest. Just this past year, late 2017, early 2018, I asked the same question. Patreon was 40%. Advertising had slipped to 7%. Yep. And merchandise, selling comics and original art, and comic conventions all were in the 10 to 13% zone.
Yep.
So what I'm seeing from the responses on webcomics.com is that most of us are seeing the greatest amount of our income coming from Patreon. Now, for how I would personally answer this, if I were to do a breakdown like you did, it would be a really simple pie chart. Patreon, 80%, Kickstarter, 20%.
Wow, really?
Yeah. It's that terrifies me because that's an awful lot of eggs to have in one basket.
That's one big leg under that table. Oh
yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. It's the antithesis of what we always kind of preached.
And for you, like comparing 5 years ago to 5 years now, so blood and plasma sales have completely dropped off that chart. Like
I hardly have to do that at all anymore. Although I still do because the cookies are really good.
Sure, absolutely. They've got those sugar ones that are amazing. No, I joke. But yeah, that's a little. However, I have to say, looking at your Patreon in the last 3 years, the growth, I see why that has become such a big chunk of your model.
Yeah. I can't say no to it. It's like
right. But I think even past Brad would say like, oh, that's a little dangerous. To have that much income and the reason why we say this for people that have never heard us talk about this is that the idea is that you want to stay nimble, and if one thing constitutes too much of your income, then if that one thing goes away, and it will eventually online, somehow the things always seem to change, like ads. It's dangerous because suddenly that rent or that mortgage payment is due, and you're like, oh, but Patreon went under for reasons that I had no control over. I'm sorry, rent person or mortgage bank.
Yeah.
And they don't take that as a check. And so, so anyway, while it's gangbusters for Brad, and hooray that the growth is amazing, and hooray for me that the growth is amazing on Patreon, and hooray for all of us, we just got to be careful. You don't want to have too many things in one basket, like Patreon or Kickstarter.
And that's why, like I've mentioned a couple times, teaching this new class at University of the Arts, the only reason I took that is that I still feel a need, and it's gonna overtax me time wise for the next 3 months. There's no doubt about that. But the reason I took it was because I still feel the need to keep a little something going elsewhere that isn't Patreon. You know what I mean? That if need be, I can start now to build the relationships that if something happens down the line, I could say, hey, how about I teach another class, or how about I do this? How about I do that? And that's the reason that I'm still having my website set up so that I can convert it to a subscription-based website that has paywall protected stuff there. Because that is the one thing that really frightens the heck out of me. And by the way, I actually sent Patreon a note through our contact Heather, and encouraged her to send it on to Jack, which she did. But just because something happened just this couple of weeks that we should probably talk about. Ko-Fi. Okay, let's start at the beginning, because we talked about this on an early Comic Lab. Patreon had that whole payment kerfuffle in December of 2017, and you saw a whole bunch of people, especially in the circles that I'm now moving in, right? Not safe for work creators, saying, well, screw Patreon, I'm going to Ko-Fi. You can catch me at Ko-Fi. Well, what happened a couple weeks ago is Ko-Fi just canceled all of their adult creators because their credit card companies were not happy with that. Which, again, going back to that 80-20 split, that's something that's always in the back of my mind.
Sure.
But something that we need to remember, especially when at the beginning of this month, and Dave, I don't think you were reading your text. So at the beginning of the month, I don't know whether it happened to you, Dave, but it happened to me. There was a whole lot of declined payments because Patreon moved the company. They switched companies for handling their credit card transactions from a company that operates in the U.S. to a company that operates in the U.K. And when that changed, all of a sudden, from our patrons' banks, they said, oh, geez, Patreon's a U.S. company. All of a sudden, it's going to a U.K. bank account. We're going to decline that because it looks like fraud, right? And that happened across the entire Patreon network. And by the way, that's how I found out. Every month around the 5th, you get a note, a little email says, congratulations, we're sending X amount of money to your bank account. Mm-hmm. I texted you when this happened, and you never responded. I said, by the way, Dave, remind me to tell you sometime about how this month on Patreon I made $8.27. Because that's the amount of money. That's the amount of money that I got from Patreon last month.
So just to back up a little bit more, my stated policy is to never respond to your text. So when you text me, I just want you to know that's going to go right in the trash. That's not even going to get read. So I'm assuming you texted me. Sure, I bet that happens, but that just goes right to a spam folder that I don't even look at. So
I've always suspected that. It's good to have confirmation finally.
In fact, I even programmed it so it has a little Price is Right when they come in. That way, I know not even to look. No, I'm sorry that I didn't respond to your text, but $8.60. So my policy with Patreon, and maybe this is a little too laissez-faire, I don't know, but and by the way, I'm sure the French speakers, I did not pronounce that right, so I'm just going to barrel right on forward. But my policy is about every 6 months, something messes up on Patreon. And people get all nervous and into Twitter and, oh, God, the sky's falling and Patreon messed up and, oh, no, biddy-bada-boo. And I have found that if I just keep my head for about 2 to 3 weeks, it all gets sorted out. There's no calm. Keep your head down. Keep working. They'll fix it. It's just they've got their learning curve going.
Yeah. Well, even beyond that, Dave, and by the way, I don't know anything more than you know in terms of how Patreon works, but I've got to guess, and I'd be willing to put some money on this bet that the reason Patreon switched their payment services was to avoid the kind of thing that Ko-Fi had to do and shut down not safe for work accounts. In other words, Patreon was trying to serve the widest degree of artists it possibly could. And again, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm thinking it's got to be connected. They were trying to service the widest degree of artists without getting involved in making judgments on what's good and what's bad. They were trying to serve everybody. And I think that's probably why they switched to that UK credit card company. And if you were one of the people sending nasty notes to your patrons saying stuff like, well, they did it again. I hope you're getting, I don't know if you're sick of this yet. I sure am. Especially if you're a not safe for work creator and you're putting that message out to your people, shut your mouth and think about what you're doing. They're trying to help you, dummy.
I love it when you get Grandpa Tone. I love it when you get Grandpa Tone.
Oh, I get so upset. Davey. I'm shaking over here in my Huntsville seat.
Oh no.
No, I get really upset because, gosh darn it, they're trying to help you. Ko-Fi sent you overboard within a matter of months. Nobody heard about Ko-Fi a year ago. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about Ko-Fi because they're all pissed off at Patreon. Now, Ko-Fi, in what's it been since that Patreon? December? It's been 8 months. Ko-Fi, boom, threw you overboard. Patreon, still trying to find a way to make this thing work. If that doesn't engender a certain amount of gratitude or at least respect, I don't know what it takes. I honestly don't.
My favorite part about when you get angry is that you don't pause to take a breath and you just keep talking and the voice gets higher and higher as your lungs are squeezing out the remaining bit of oxygen that they have in them, and you're going to make your point, by God, but you're not going to take a breath, and you can feel your cheeks getting hot and red. It's great.
One of these days I'm going to get to the end of one of these rants and you're just going to hear thump. I will have fallen over from lack of oxygen.
The sound of flesh hitting floor. Just plunk.
Yeah, and that's especially painful on No Pants Thursdays over here.
But I can tell that it's a topic that gets you excited because you're like, I don't have time to stop for a breath. Here we go. And you just start barreling forward. Don't hold me back now, lungs. Papa's got a point he's got to make.
I will not be held back by something as inconsequential as oxygen.
No little oxygen molecule's going to slow Brad Geiger down.
But all of which to say, number one, take a minute and be thankful Patreon's there, especially for the fact that all of us, 40% of us, at least based on this rinky-dink webcomics.com poll, are calling it our number one source. And that's changed a lot from over the years. And listen, here's the deal. And we've said this before. Even if something does happen with Patreon, the thing that they started is going to continue for a long, long time until something much bigger takes over. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it absolutely will. So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, while Grandpa recovers from going red in the face,
I need to take a drink.
Let me remind you of the last part of this question. What are the key areas a new cartoonist should focus on as far as earning income? Now, this is a trickier question. I think I know my answer.
I know my answer.
I'm going to open this up for Captain Oxygen to go first on this one.
This is real simple. Get a pen. What are the key areas that
Wait, hold on. This one's not working. Let me get a different pen. Hold on.
You dirty bird, you. Listen to the question. What are the key areas a new cartoonist should focus on as far as earning income? And the answer is you shouldn't be focused on earning income at all. You should be focused on getting good at comics. And if you're a new cartoonist, you're probably not good yet, and that's okay. You should be focused on doing your comic, and doing your comic and maybe a little bit of social media and then going right back to doing your comic. And then when you're putting out a good comic and you're seeing that it's getting great response and people are responding to it, now you do a Patreon, now you do a Kickstarter, now you start to talk about monetizing. But until that happens, monetization is izing. And but first work on your comic. That's what a new cartoon. If I see a new cartoonist out there talking about Patreon or Kickstarter and all that stuff, and then rubbing their temples saying, "Oh, why didn't this work? The system must be against me." No. New cartoonists, you put your head down and start working on cartoons. You start working on comics, learn your craft. And then in a couple of years, we can talk income.
Okay. I will wholeheartedly co-sign on that point. I think that's great. I think you're right. But let's say now that they're asking 2-3 years later, what's the first part of as Brad put it, monetization? What part? What a jerk I'm being today. I'm sorry. What is the first income stream that they should focus on, or the first 3 income streams that they should focus on?
Well, I think the first thing you do is open up a Patreon and just keep it simple. Keep a couple of tiers. The first one being, your $2, and I do think that's the new base is $2. Your $2 pledge just to support the comic, and then a higher pledge where you might start to offer some exclusives. And just keep it real simple. And once you have enough material for something physical like a book, and you've got your Patreon and you can start to see how people are responding to that Patreon, you can use that information to consider a Kickstarter. That would be the first 2. And by the way, you did not hear the word comic convention anywhere in that.
You know what? I won't disagree with you. I mean, I can do a comics convention because I have a lot of buildup of materials and a history of going to them. And I only do the 2 that I make money at. So I would co-sign maybe avoiding Comic Cons for the first few years because frankly, they might be fading from need for young cartoonists. I'm not 100% ready to sign off on that, but I think it's fading, definitely. But
how often do you see somebody on Twitter say, "Hey, I just got accepted for XYZ comic convention. Now I got to make some comics to bring." And I keep looking at that and I'm like, you dope. You don't do it. You don't say, "I got accepted to this convention. Now I've got to make some comics to bring." You get a warehouse full of no, dude. I'm thinking of the guy right now. I'll point you right to his Twitter. But first, you get a warehouse full of comics that you've funded through Kickstarter, and then maybe you sign up to a comic convention to move those comics. Wow. But you don't do it the other way.
I thought you were joking. That's a real person? Wow. All right. Well.
Okay, you start talking. I'm going to go search Twitter.
No, you don't have to find
I'll pretend to be listening to you.
I don't want you to go red in the face. I believe you. I'm taking you by the shoulders and saying I believe you. So I would agree with Brad. I think the low-hanging fruit is Patreon first. I think if you're newish or a couple years in and you're like ready to start, Patreon is great. I would set up 1-2 tiers and keep it real simple. And then as that grows, your Patreon folks, your patrons, or your true fans, can also start to inform you about like small baby steps you can start taking into merch if you'd like to do that, or into one bigger Kickstarter project that's worth somewhere between $2,000 and $10,000, say. And if you, again, starting small, I think that's a great first baby step is from Patreon to try Kickstarter about a year later. And so I think Brad's point is the best one to be made there.
And don't get disappointed if you launch don't get disappointed if you launch that Patreon and you don't get a big response just yet. Remember, this is a slow build. It's a marathon, not a sprint. In fact, when you launch that Patreon, you should expect that you're only going to get a few and a few more and a few more. And it's going to feel really dopey making Patreon posts to a dozen people or a half dozen people. But 2 things. Number 1, don't get discouraged. You got a long career ahead of you. And number 2, watch and pay attention to what they're responding to, what works and what doesn't work. Because those reward tiers that you chose, number 1, hopefully you limit it to just a couple. And number two, you can change those at any time as long as you give people a little heads up. Nobody's going to get upset. And you should be evolving this Patreon campaign as you move forward based on the response to what you're putting out there. And as you evolve it and make hopefully good, solid decisions, you're going to see more and more patrons jump in.
Yep.
Yeah.
I absolutely co-sign on that. And I think we've actually found a good path forward for people. So I think we can leave that one there, my friend. What do you think?
Very good. Well, I think, Dave, we have room for one more question from one of our $5 level patrons.
All right, well then we'll do that. This one's kind of a fun one. Hey, Dave and Brad, have you two ever swapped comics for a week to see what you would do with each other's ideas? If not, why not? So, Brad, have we ever swapped comics for a week?
You know what, Dave? I want to go back and re-record this. We should not have done this on a day that I got all grumpy and irritable over Patreon and stuff, because my answer is going to sound extra snotty. No, I've never swapped comics for a week to see what somebody else would do with my comic, because I've always considered this to be a business, and that's not what I do. That's not what my people signed up for when they followed my comic, and I think it's a really dopey idea.
Well, all right, Captain Killjoy, slow your roll over there.
Oh, what a dumb! I hate. You know what? I hate.
Boy,
all
I
of
tell
that.
you what, the Alabama Heat is not agreeing with you.
I hate all of that stuff. I hated April Fool's Day with the web comics. Everybody had to do switch comics for April Fool. I hated all of that stuff, and you know why? Because for a number of reasons. Plus, what inevitably I'm going to find out is when Dave does Evil Inc., he does it way better than I do, and I've got to deal with that for the rest of my life.
Well, we know that that's not going to happen, but I see what they're getting at is that the joy. Listen to Captain Pessimistic over here. They're asking a basic question of, have you ever done something fun, Brad? And Brad's like, no, I don't like having fun. Fun is for jerks. Everyone is a jerk. I'm Brad Geiger.
In my day, we had misery, and we liked it.
I like eating gravel for lunch. I'm Brad Geiger.
I'm being truthful with you, though. I wish I could tell you that was an act, but you just got unfiltered Brad right there.
It's just funny because I feel like this question is coming up with a spring in their step and like, hey, Brad and Dave, have you guys ever swapped comics? Because that seems like that'd be swell. And Brad just gets out like a switch and is like whacking the kid like, no. I've never switched comics. No, get out of here. I'm Brad Geiger. I don't like smiling.
What a dumb idea.
What a dummy.
And you're dumb for suggesting it.
You go running home to mom and dad and you tell them they raised a dummy. I'm Brad Geiger. So I'm going to take a different tack to this because
I bet you will.
I'm going to remind Brad that when my eldest was born, I said to friends, I'm not going to have time. This was back when the ad model was more important. And if you missed a day, it was a big deal.
Yes.
So I was doing Sheldon 7 days a week. And I said to Brad, would you like to draw a Sheldon for a day? And Brad back then was joy-filled and said yes. He had a smile in his heart and he said yes.
Did I do a Sheldon?
Do you not remember? See, this is how much the joy has faded from his life. Look at this. Look at this withered old husk of a man. Did I smile once? I don't remember. I don't remember joy. Did it taste like strawberries, Mr. Frodo? I don't remember.
Oh my God. I really hope the people next door are out for the afternoon.
I do like the idea now that I stumbled on it that you're like Frodo on the steps of Mount Doom going, I've forgotten the taste of strawberries. I'm Brad Geiger. Oh, joy has left my heart.
Oh God, I was gonna compliment you, by the way, just and you made me think of it. On Instagram, you posted a cartoon of the two people, and there's a fan in between them, and he says something like, "I've forgotten the taste of happiness," or how did
joy.
you phrase that
again?
again?
It was the taste of joy. Yeah.
Oh, and I read that, and I'm like, oh my God, you use language so beautifully sometimes. That phrase, I was killed right
there.
there.
Oh, no, you know what it was? I don't remember the taste of hope. That's what it was.
Yes, the taste of hope. Oh, it was wonderful. And then Arthur's comeback was just as delightful. But anyway, without reading through your comics to people.
No, but I want to now argue from Brad's point, because I think I was too rough on you, and now I want to be. This is like an abusive relationship. Now I want to apologize. Because here's the truth: is that comics are like children; they're your unique creation, and so I see why Brad is saying this from a creative standpoint. He's absolutely right. It's yours. Yeah. It's your baby. It's a version of you brought to life in story form, in characters that you've created and ideas that you've created, and so it's yours. It's yours to own. You love it. It's yours. And so I get that. And then Brad has layered on top of that, it's a business. And so doing frivolous things like saying, hey, this week, every character is going to be drawn purple. La da 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 da. What silly, goofy, he's also saying like people have an expectation of a certain value level. And so you don't want to just throw a curveball at them, right? Is that what you're saying, Brad?
That's exactly what I'm saying. In a much nicer way, but that's exactly what I'm saying.
And then, I will say to that I agree with both of those thoughts. Those are nice. But I think also I have had lighter moments in my career where I was like, you know what? The comic can just be fun. If I'm having fun, then everyone else is having fun. So I will do, like, for example, right now, I've currently completely abandoned Sheldon. And right now my comic is just doing anatomy of different authors. And I'm having a heck of fun with it. And 90% of the people are having fun with it. And the 10% that are grumpy, I read their emails out loud and I laugh at them, or I forward them to Brad.
And I'm loving, okay, can I be, I'm into being honest today. Okay. When you said you were going to do Anatomy of Authors, I immediately said, oh, what an idea. He's going to hit, you got 3 authors you could do that everybody knows. And after that, it's going to get really hard to do, right? You can do what? Dr. Seuss, George R.R. Martin, Edgar Allan Poe, and maybe one other, right? And it's like, this idea does not have legs. He's going to fall right on his face. How am I going to tell my friend this? It's a horrible idea. And you've been doing it for what? 4 weeks, 5 weeks. How many have you posted so far? Not more than a half dozen.
4 or 5 weeks. It's around 20 authors so far.
It's the most brilliant, wonderful stuff I've ever. And you found a great way to kind of introduce an author that I might not be familiar with, like the Nancy Drew. I had no idea that was written by a team of people. You have such a nice way of introducing that and reaffirming it. So if I'm reading about an author that I'm not that familiar with, like the guy that wrote Dune, I don't know anything about that guy, but that comic was wonderful and very funny. And now I kind of want to read Dune now. But yeah, it's such a great, it's an idea that I would have tried to, if you would have come to me with this idea, I would have spent the next hour trying to talk you out of it. I'm so glad you don't listen to me because it's a great idea.
At the beginning of the show, we talked about my internal monologue is do, and now we've learned that Brad's internal monologue is what Dave is up to. What is this thing Dave's doing? Jeez, what a hot plate of shit that is. God, what an idea.
This freaking guy.
what a dummy. Dave, run home and tell your parents you're an idiot. That's twice I've used that same construction. Anyway, here's where the brilliance of this is going to come to fruition, Brad. Not only am I having, so I have two of my degrees are in literature, right? So it's in my bones. I love it. I get to make fun of authors that I read, right? But it's also, here's the genius of it is, you know who buys a lot of books in a Kickstarter? People that like books.
Yeah. And librarians, when they buy a book, they buy multiple books. And those are people that like books.
I guarantee you this Kickstarter is going to do well just because the topic and the platform is perfect for Kickstarter. So We'll check back in a year on this, but I think that Kickstarter is going to do real good. We'll see.
Such a great idea, and you're delivering it wonderfully. I really have to take my hat off to you. You're taking what I would have considered an impossible idea and just knocking them out of the park, everyone.
Well, you don't have to dress it up. Thank you, but it's going okay. I like that the guilt kicked in on you for making fun of me. Like, no, it's going great though. You're doing a wonderful job.
Oh shucks! I love making you squirm. That's half the fun of doing this show.
Well, so listen, on just to put a button on this questioner who had a kind question. So Brad has done a Sheldon. I don't know that I have ever been invited to do an Evil Link.
Don't feel bad. I don't think I've invited many people at all to ever do. In fact, my memory may be fading, but I don't think I've ever said to somebody, come and do an Evil Link. I might have, I'm not even sure I ran a guest strip. I must have run a guest strip at some point.
I don't think you have, to your credit. And I do say it as credit. To your credit, you have been the sole producer of all those many thousands of Evil Link. So no, I don't think you've ever had anybody as far as I know. The one capstone I wanted to say to this, and I think this is worth mentioning, is that Drive, thankfully, has been successful enough on Patreon where I can hire artists that I respect to play in the sandbox of that Drive universe, and they tell 10 to 15 page stories, and that has been really delightful for me to not only pay them a rate that meets or beats Marvel DC rates, but also I let them have free reign. I really try not to give editorial notes and let them do what they want. Because A, most people are respectful if you ask the right artist, and then B, it's really genuinely fun to see what they come up with. So far, most of it has added to the overall canon, and it's been fun. So that's my answer to that questioner, which differs a little bit from Brad's answer for that questioner.
I like how you keep saying questioner because you're fighting consciously to not say question asker.
Well, you've put question asker in my head, and it's the dumbest. I'm angry about it.
I can tell. Well, finally, you're angry about something. Oh, do you hear that?
Oh, I do hear that.
Yeah, that's that guitar that says you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been a very sweaty and red-in-the-face Brad Geiger.
You know the truth.
The editor of webcomics.com, cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com, and current user of the Social Hour at the Huntsville, Alabama hotel he's staying at.
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock. That's where I'm going as soon as we turn these microphones off. And Dave Kellett, they had pulled pork yesterday, co-director of Strip and cartoonist of Sheldon and Light Beer at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
I love that Light Beer is the selling point. Anyway, the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. Really light beer. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions at www.woodsong.media.
It tastes great. Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.
Great.
Now here's where you say less filling.
If I'm really in a pickle and I need an idea, a shower is great.
And it's another no pants activity.
Yeah. Which I'm always trying to up in my life. Yes. Says the man with no pants on in Huntsville, Alabama.